This is a season of turbulence in India's opposition parties. There are question marks over the nature of opposition unity, who will lead the opposition. Also, question marks being raised by politicians who've turned authors and have made certain controversial remarks in their books. The latest being the Congress leader Manish Tewari, whose new book, 10 Flashpoints, 20 Years, National Security Situations That Impacted India, is just out. Manish Tewari, you've already stirred a controversy by suggesting in your book that the Manmohan Singh government got it wrong after 26/11 by adopting a policy of strategic restraint. You would have preferred what you call a kinetic response to Pakistan, targeting Pakistan more aggressively. People are saying here is Manish Tewari going against his own government at the time, the Manmohan Singh government.
Well, there's a context to 26/11, Rajdeep, which we need to understand. Post our victory in the Kargil war, India entered into a very nasty phase of the proxy war which Pakistan had unleashed against us. So you had the IC-814 hijack, you had the attack on the Jammu Kashmir Assembly, you had the attack on the Parliament of India, and while Operation Parakram was going on, you had the assault on the Kaluchuk military camp, then you had the Mumbai train bombings across Indian cities, and this went across, different political dispensations. So by the time when we came to 26/11, we had already been at the receiving end for 8 long years of these very nasty depredations. And 26/11, in that sense of the word, became an inflection point because of the sheer perversity and the sheer barbarousness of the assault. And so therefore, in my considered estimation, it did warrant a kinetic response, and that is what I have said.
It's easy to say kinetic response. You've got a former foreign secretary and then national security advisor, Shiv Shankar Menon, saying it was debated whether India should attack Pakistan, but eventually the government decided on strategic restraint. Now, a kinetic response sounds very nice in a book, but it could have escalated into a full-fledged war, possibly. Do you really believe that that is the only deterrence against terror? And do you therefore support what Narendra Modi ji did after Pulwama, where he went into Pakistan, the Air Force went and bombed Balakot?
Well, since you've juxtaposed those two situations, you have brought us back to the classical dilemma which has been afflicting Indian policy makers going back to 1980, that whether the use of conventional force against non-state actors is efficacious. If that is efficacious, how do you calibrate it? And does that bring about a behavior change in your adversary? And in my humble estimation, the surgical strikes post Uri and the Balakot bombings have not brought about a substantive change in the behavior of Pakistan.
No, so what is the... Let's be very clear. Already the BJP is saying here is Manish Tewari virtually endorsing, echoing the Modi line of muscular strike backs as has been done post-Uri, and is critical of what the Congress governments did, which was seen as weakness. Is Manish Tewari echoing what the BJP has said, that India needed a stronger response in the Manmohan Singh years, and Narendra Modi ji has provided that stronger response to Pakistan?
Well, I have no answer to illiteracy. If the BJP wants to do a press conference based upon an excerpt of the book, they can be my guest. But the fact is that this book is equally critical of the national security choices which the NDA BJP government has made, for the simple reason that I do not believe and I do not think that those choices have also resulted in any substantive change in the behavior of Pakistan, which is a hard state, which is a quasi-military state. And that is why I argue in this book that for India to be able to achieve its true potential, you require peace on the periphery, and therefore you need to explore a different modus vivendi, whether it is Pakistan, where you are bogged down by the baggage of partition, or it is China, where undelineated borders going all the way back to 1947 are keeping that relationship contentious.
But you're still sticking to your line that post-26/11, given the spate of terror attacks that had taken place, India needed to show a stronger response. you're moving away from the Shiv Shankar Menon, Manmohan Singh line that strategic restraint was necessary to de-escalate the situation. It could not have spiraled into war.
In fact, it's interesting that you mentioned the former National Security Advisor who released my book. In his own book, Choices, he begins by saying that initially he was an advocate of a kinetic response, given the sheer barbarity of the assault. But then he says that on sober reflection, I came to the conclusion that the response which was then initiated by the government was perhaps a more appropriate response. Now, that is Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon's view. In my humble estimation, there should have been a kinetic response because, to my mind, 2611 unfortunately does not have any parallels.
No, what does kinetic response mean? Targeted attacks, full-scale war, limited attacks? I mean, it's very easy.
Punishment should have been imposed on the perpetrators or the masterminds of the attack. Number two, even on the Pakistani state for having adopted this policy of using non-state actors to bleed India with 1,000 cuts. That's my view.
Because it's not just Pakistan, you've got China as well. And on China, again, the Congress has suggested that the Modi government has not given a proportionate response to what has happened in Ladakh, or certainly has not done enough to send out a firmer message to China.
Well, insofar as China is concerned, it is uncanny that like in 1999, before the Kargil war, when we were caught completely napping by the scale of the intrusion, 160 miles long and 9 kilometers deep. Similarly, 21 years later, when the Chinese did the same thing across multiple points on the line of actual control, we unfortunately have again been caught napping. So therefore, all the review committees that we put in place, and the Kargil Review Committee had been very scathing about the intelligence failure, and all the structures which we may have built, all that unfortunately does not seem to have yielded result even in 2020.
In conclusion, do you believe these issues should be debated in public fora, whether it is the situation in Ladakh, whether it is how do you deal with Pak-based terror? Should this be debated in parliamentary fora? Because you have a shrill, hyper-polarized debate. You've got Rahul Gandhi, who will use every opportunity, his critics say, to target the Modi government on contentious issues of national security, on sensitive issues of national security.
If you have a regular debate on national security issues, the levels of polarization will come down. Primarily because you do not have discussions in legislature on such contentious issues, you see these highly polarized responses playing themselves out. Every democracy around the world, even the US after 9/11, or for that matter, Britain during the Second World War, had a functioning parliament discussing all these issues in real time. So therefore, just because an issue is sensitive, that should not be the excuse to sweep it under the table.
Manish Tewari, thank you very much for joining us, and good luck to your endeavor to create a bipartisan debate on sensitive issues of national security.
Thank you very
much
much
for joining
Bye.
us. Manish Tewari of the Congress Party.